So, Anthony Horowitz, I mean, I have to start off by congratulating you. I mean, this Foyle's War, finally eligible for Emmys, unfortunately, for the very last one. I mean, the last of 28 films. So while I'm thrilled that it's finally going to be in contention at the Emmys, I'm a little heartbroken that there are no more to come. So talk to us a little bit about that journey, but particularly those last three episodes that you did last year, and how you decided to wrap it up.
Okay, Paul. I mean, it's a long story, really, but the truth of the matter is this: is that I created that show back in the year, about 1999, with my wife Jill Green, who was also the producer of the show, and as you know very well, we have followed the war pretty much year for year from 1940 all the way through to 45 over the 28 episodes, most of which I wrote. And the truth of the matter is that first of all, we ran out of war. We got to 1945, we did VE Day, then we did VJ Day, nothing more to write about the war. And at that point, which was I think about 3 years ago, we could have stopped. But then we had this idea, we were all keen to keep going. And we had this idea that just because the show was called Foyle's War didn't mean we have to stop in 45, because of course the Cold War continues. It's just the enemy changes. Hitler is dead, but now suddenly Britain wakes up to the fact that the Russians are an even greater menace, Joe Stalin, than Hitler was. And added to that, you've got the atomic bomb has been invented, the entire world warfare, and suddenly we're in a country which is also rediscovering itself. I mean, after and the community spirit of the war suddenly bankrupt and hasn't it? There's employment issues. All these soldiers are returning home. The divorce rate is soaring as soldiers come back to families they don't know. And I suddenly realized that this was a fantastic world to tell more stories, which was always my motivation. How many stories could we tell about Foyle and about this world? Not many TV shows have done this, I think. We invented ourselves. We left Hastings on the south coast of Britain. We left the seagulls and the beaches and the waves and that sort of feeling of seaside. And we came back to London and we entered the world of intelligence. We had a whole new cast of people. We had our own M figure. We had Rupert Vantisart there behind his desk, and Ellie Haddington as sort of sinister head of the Special Operations Executive. And we re-established Foyle. And I loved exploring it. But then you see what happened was we got to 1945, 46, 47. And finally I realized I was running out of stories. Not my own stories. There are plenty of those, but stories that were based on truth. All the Foyle's War episodes, from start to finish, every single one of them is one true story. And when we talk about Elise, that will also be the Amazon 7. Britain becomes quite a grey place, quite a depressive place, and it sort of goes into this sort of miasma all the way until really about the late 1950s and sort of the 60s and the explosion of flower power and hippies and all that sort of stuff. So there were no more stories to tell, so we stopped.
So I wanted to go back to the beginning, back in '99, and how, I mean, because what's so wonderful about Foyle's War is this original creation. It's not based on anything, or is it? You tell me.
No, it's absolutely an original story.
And so my understanding is that ITV was looking for another detective series after they were winding up Inspector Morse. Is that sort of?
That is right. What had happened was I'd been working on a series called Midsummer Murders, which had been huge in Britain, and I created that show with two other people based on books by a lady called Caroline Graham. And since you mentioned Curtin earlier, I'd also worked on Poirot for many years as well. Agatha Christie's Poirot. I wrote many episodes for David Suchet, who remains a good friend of mine to this day. But back in 1999, ITV had a problem because it looked at that stage as if Midsummer Murders was going to end. It didn't, in fact, but it looked as if it might. Oh. A show called Taggart had come to the end, and as you correctly say, Morse had finished as well. So they needed a big detective drama, and they came to me because, as I said to them in my pitch, whoever you choose to do a new crime drama, I'll probably end up writing it because that's what I do. I write so much crime stuff. And I wanted to do a different sort of show. And this was my philosophy. If I spend 3 months of my life writing a drama for you, the audience, and if you, the audience, give me 2 hours of your life to watch my drama, is it possible to do something more than to just reveal that the butler did it, or the doctor did it, or that the mother did it, the wife did it, whatever? Is it possible to use murder mystery fiction, which I love, to create a bigger picture, to do something more sort of more significant in a way? Right. And so I came up with the idea of doing murder stories at a time when murder is devalued. If you've got a detective solving, who comes up on a body in a library, there's a body in a library, a woman has been killed, is that somehow less interesting if just 50 miles away across the channel, 500 people are being killed by the Nazis every single day? Murder suddenly doesn't have that significance anymore. And so the whole idea was to do a detective who is almost irrelevant to the world picture, and who has to struggle week after week with the dilemma of solving these little murders in a coastal town when he knows that the whole world around him is dying or being murdered. And that was where the stories began. And from the very beginning, I was as interested in, I love murder mystery. I love clues. I love red herrings. I love secrets you can't guess. I love big reveals at the end. I love all that stuff. But what I really wanted to do was to tell real stories about Britain, 1940 through to 45, stories that nobody knew, and to tell them in the envelope of a murder mystery series. And that was the idea. And
then we mentioned before that your wife is the producer. Was she from the outset had that role? I mean, were you two a package presented to ITV?
Yeah, we were indeed. Jill Green, who runs a company at the time, it was called Green Lit Productions. It's changed now, but was the company that made it. She'd been running it for some time, and we had worked together a little bit off and on. We'd done a film together and a couple of little bits and pieces, and we just realized that why work for somebody else when we could work for each other? For a writer, owning a property, owning something like Foyle's War, it's not about money. It's not really about control. What it's about involvement. It's about being involved in every aspect of the production and being able to sort of work with the director, with the casting, with the actors, with everybody, and to feel part of the whole process.
So in terms of the casting, I mean, I've read repeatedly that Michael Kitchen was your dream Foyle. I mean, here's what happens. I mean, when you start a series like Foyle's War, you come up with a hit list. You look at who's around, who's available, who might do the show, and you draw up your dream list of candidates. Now, our list, it is absolutely true, had one name on it, and that name was Michael Kitchen, an actor who had done some fantastic work. He'd been in the original House of Cards. Yeah. He'd also done Out of Africa with Robert Redford, and he had a very, very distinguished career, but he had never done a long-running television series, and I thought he would be perfect for it. And it was one of those very rare occasions in my life where the first choice said yes. Jill and I traveled up together to Manchester, which is about 200 or 300 miles out of London, to go and see him. He was doing a play up there. We had lunch with him. We pitched the idea to him, and he agreed, which was phenomenal. I mean, he hadn't done this before. He was quite what is the word I'm looking for? He needed to be persuaded. I mean, he didn't want to do a television show that was going to go downhill and become formulaic. He's a man of very, very high demands. I mean, he's somebody who is always, from the beginning to the end, he would look at every single script and question every single line. It wasn't always an easy relationship, but it was always a very good one. Well, and there isn't, what I found as a viewer from episode 1, I mean, there's an integrity about the character. He evolves, but there aren't these, sometimes you watch things and it's suddenly from one episode to another, they're suddenly doing something different. And I guess part of that's the actor, but also with you so you wrote 24 of the 28. I'm really curious about how involved were you in the other 4, and why did you not write them?
Well, give me a break, for heaven's sake. I mean, I didn't want to write as many as I wrote, believe me. I mean, we always had trouble finding other writers to do this show. And the reason for that was you needed to have, first of all, an ability you needed to know the history and to know the Second World War and to be interested in that. then you needed to be able to create a murder mystery that worked. And I'm very strict about that. I think that you can't cheat the audience. You've got to let all the clues be out there. People are going to be able to guess it, and there's got to be a real satisfaction at the end of a show that you know, you feel that you've not been lied to or deceived by the writer. Plus, you've got to also be able to take on board all these different characters, not just Foyle, but Sam and Milner when we were working with him, and then later on all the MI5 characters. So there was an element of that too. And we couldn't find writers to do it. I mean, it wasn't easy. And some years I wrote 4 two-hour films, and you have no idea how much work that was. That was a crazy amount of work to be doing. And, you know, I sometimes found I could almost barely do it and manage it. And I wanted other writers. So it wasn't, you know, I wasn't guzzling all these scripts for myself or keeping to myself out of egotistical reasons. It just worked out that way.
But I think what it does then is the canon, the 28 of them, I mean, as each one of them is a feature-length film, but then as a whole, I mean, and what's so great about services like Acorn is people can now binge on them. Somebody could spend, you know, a weekend with Foyle, go through the whole war with him.
And a weekend for them, 15 years for me.
Yeah. So, you know, in terms of the casting, I mean, Michael Kitchen, you're #1, but now Honeysuckle Weeks, I mean, the name, she's delicious on so many levels, but wasn't she a last-minute addition or just a last-minute find?
That's absolutely correct. I don't quite know what happened with the casting. There was another actress in the frame to play the part. And at the very, very last minute, somebody, maybe ITV, decided that that was a mistake and that actually this actress who had come in, I think only a week before we started shooting almost, very, very late in the day, Honeysuckle Weeks came in, charmed us immediately. It's a very, very important character in the series. First of all, I wrote about the Second World War because I was born in 1955, and I learned about the Second World War from my nanny, who had been a WAF driver in the war, and used to tell me story after story about all the men she dated and the drinks she drank and the battles she saw in the air. She saw the Battle of Britain, my nanny, you know, it's an amazing thought. And in a way, she was the inspiration for both the series and certainly that character, who I originally named after my nanny, although I had to change the name to Sam. I forget quite why, but we did. So the character design was important for that role, but also, you know, a detective always has a sidekick. So Morse has Lewis, Poirot has Hastings, Holmes has Watson, etc. And it was very, very important to try and change that formula a little bit. So I came up with the idea that first of all, he would have a female sidekick who would be his driver rather than his sort of assistant, his beyond like and another person into the mix, Milner, played by Anthony Horowitz. And so instead of having 2, there would be 3, which would change the whole chemistry of the murder mystery. And although we later lost Anthony, because when the series moved away from Hastings, I couldn't sensibly bring him on. He was also a star of the show. I mean,
right? No, it's wonderful because the chemistry between the 3 of them, and then particularly Sam and Foyle in the end, and it's not necessarily parental child, but there's a bond between the 2 of them. So we talked a little bit earlier about Morse, and I can't help but hope that you have an endeavor in you, that you have the early years of Foyle. Is that too much to ask for? I mean,
it has been suggested to me. I mean, my publishers would love me to do some Foyle's books. I'm not certain it will happen, to be honest with you. You know, it's a huge body of work to have done, and I'm now in the mood for a change. I want to do something a bit sort of with a different tone, a different sort of audience. I want, you know, I want to write a more modern show. As a writer, and I've been writing for a very long time for both television and books, I find I have to keep challenging myself. I have to keep you know, finding new horizons and stuff. I'm not the sort of writer who just wants to be doing the same thing again and again. And as you know, to go and do Endeavour, to go back to the 1920s and a young Foyle between the wars, I'm not sure I would actually want to do that right now. I'm not ruling it out ever. I never rule anything out, but at the moment I'm moving on.
Okay. Because Downton's ending, so there's a hunger for, there'll be a need for another show set in the Jazz Age. So, you know, just, But you mentioned about other writing, and I can't let you go without referencing this. I mean, it's to have done the 24 Foyle's War is extraordinary enough, but to at the same time do your young adult series, Alex Rider and the rest of them, and now also 2 Holmes books through the estate, and now I understand the next James Bond as well. So
that's absolutely correct. Here it is. It's a new James Bond novel. Well, that's right. It says on the front, untitled Bond novel. I thought for a terrible minute I was going to show a title, which, I mean, the lawyers would kill me. But there it is, finished and on its way to the publishers.
Just, I mean, a seemingly mundane question, but I mean, what is your schedule like? I mean, this output is so extraordinary. I mean, tell me it's a lot of hard work and it's every day sitting in front of the, oh, actually, there's a good question. Is it the computer or do you write by longhand?
I tend to, you know, here I am working on a new TV show here, and that's what that's a clue for you. That's what my script's like when this is the very beginning of a new and see we break one there and one. This is where it all starts with that, and then I tend to write with pen and ink. And where I'm sitting now, you can see that behind me these are my books, and this is my office where I work. My wife works down the bottom there at that end there, and that's the other end of my office up that end. You can see the movie poster for Stormbreaker there. So I spend an awful lot of time sitting in this chair here. It's not hard work, Paul. I don't think of it in that way. I love writing. I mean, it's what I love more than anything in this world. It's what I sort of believe, if you'll forgive me for sounding a bit mawkish, but it's what I believe I was born to do. And I sit in this chair and I work at this desk, I suppose, for about 10 hours a day, maybe longer sometimes. Today I've been writing this new TV series, and I started about 8 this morning, and we're talking now, and it's 7 at night. So that's sort of my day.
Wow. Well, that's exciting to know that there's something else coming down the line. Well, listen, I'm just so, as I said at the outset, delighted that Acorn stepped in, helped co-produce these. I'm not going to even call them the last 3, the most recent 3 of the Foyle's Wars, so that you're eligible to contend at the Emmys. And I'm hopeful. I mean, there's to me, the end wasn't the end. It was maybe they bid adieu. I mean, Sam's expecting. I don't know what's going to happen with Foyles and Elizabeth Addis. There's certainly, I feel that you left things unresolved for a reason, and if that's what I want to believe, that it's going to be coming back in some way, shape, or form. So,
well, you never know.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. And
it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.